All set.
All right. So it's 7:30 p.m., September 21st. Going to call the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Members present: Andy Marco, Doug Roberts, Lori Sempervon. Let's see, we'll seat her for Joe Hall. So let's see, no applications to be received tonight. Item D, public hearing, PZ-21-16, proposed zoning amendment pertaining to use changes in the design commercial zone. Proposed new zoning regulations, section 5.12, South Willington Village mixed use, SWV, applicant, Planning and Zoning Commission.
So we have a couple of different sections that we've discussed and are currently for consideration. We have some modifications to the design commercial zone, which are just tweaks to existing language, and then 5.12, which is an entirely new section of the regs, which will apply ultimately to the South Willington Village area. I think we should probably start with the 5.12 and John Gaskowski, who is my partner where I work. We've been workshopping this with Economic Development Commission. So I have him here to sort of explain and kind of speak on their behalf. I think is probably a good way to start, if you agree, Walter.
Yes, and John Tien's joined us as well.
All right. May I commence, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. So for the record, my name is John Gaskowski. I'm a planner with Tyche Planning and Policy Group. I'm Mike D'Amato's colleague, and the two of us have been serving the Economic Development Commission as consultants for a couple of years now, about 2 years now. And one of the initiatives that the Economic Development Commission identified in an effort to revitalize South Willington a bit was the creation of a new village mixed use zone, which we've developed as proposed new section 5.12 of the Willington zoning regulations, with the expressed aim and the explicit objectives, which are on the first portion of this proposed regulation, to recognize the economic importance of South Willington Village, which is not only because of its historic mixed-use character and businesses sort of centered around the school and the old mill, but also to recognize the very important historic character of the neighborhood, to preserve that through some design considerations. And then to encourage a more vibrant blend of use by sort of reducing the barriers to do different sorts of land uses that are sort of in keeping with the heritage of South Willington Village. And I should note that you're certainly welcome to stop me whenever someone has questions. If you would like, I'd be happy to share my screen to just go through briefly what we've got proposed. But I would hope that folks have gotten a chance. Would you like me to share the screen, Mr. Chairman, or should I just?
Yes, you should share the screen in case everyone hasn't read it.
Mike, can you authorize?
And I guess the
Unless
other thing
you want
that, you can go for it. The only thing I just want to note is, and because you guys have seen this before, I mean, we've talked with you about the conceptual drafts. We also had Economic Development had a public meeting related to a couple of projects and things where we did direct mailings to the folks within this area and said, Economic Development is having this meeting. We want to hear from you. We want you to review the proposed language. So we did have that. We did hear from them. So that discussion happened probably about 2 months ago, and the regulation that's before the commission now has been modified in response to some of the comments we got during that public meeting.
Exactly. And so geographically, so this would be a new, it's not a floating zone. This would be a redesignation of several actual parcels, basically fronting along Route 32 with a couple of lots, sort of one level back of Route 32, basically from the intersection of Fisher Hill Road and River Road in the north, all the way down to the Willington town line on both sides of Route 32 for the entire extent. In the core of the South Willington Village area, by the church and the school, so we have a couple of those side streets extending out to the east. We included parcels, sort of the second layer. So that's the geographic scope of that, basically the historic section of South Willington Village. And what we have done is we have added a number of land uses, reflecting the fact that South Willington is very well built up and many of the buildings are historic, to create a hierarchy of use and reuse. So the reuse of an existing building, for the most part, for residential, office, retail, cafes, things like that, are to be allowed with a relatively simple zoning permit or site plan. But if you are going to build something new, new offices, new restaurant, new multifamily or something like that, new commercial, that would require a special exception. So the idea is to make it easy to reuse and revitalize existing facilities, but pay extra attention to the construction of new facilities to make sure that they fit in terms of their scale, their massing, their historic architectural character, and their pedestrian connectivity. A couple of things that we have prohibited outright: motor vehicle and service stations, drive-through facilities, self-storage, warehouse, and distribution. Those generally do not add to the character of South Willington Village as we have defined it. But
you already have a large
we
one
already
anyway.
we already have some self-storage. You have some of those things already. And so those would be, of course, be pre-existing non-conforming by this regulation. But the idea is to avoid new facilities like that, but to encourage a variety of other uses that are friendly, to the context and the scale of South Willington Village. The other thing that this is important to point out is that the mill which the current regulations require basically special permits every time there's a new tenant inside the mill. This would make it much easier for the owner to swap out users and to incorporate all sorts of a variety of uses in the mill without sort of extensive need for permitting. So those are the table of uses. Gone through the application process. For the most part, reuse of existing buildings is a zoning permit. New construction is a special permit. We wanted to encourage pedestrian friendly and a pedestrian oriented development. So encourage parking to go behind buildings, encourage shared use of parking. So we're not overbuilding our parking lots and sort of taking away from the pedestrian environment. And then also to encourage site design standards that reflect, and we particularly call out the building design that satisfies the South Willington Village design guidelines that were part of the South Willington preservation study that was done in 2015. So we wanted to make sure that the good ideas and the documentation that were part of that study is memorialized in these regulations, and those design considerations are incorporated. That's a very brief overview, but again, as Mike said, this was developed over a series of many months with the Economic Development Commission, and we had done that direct outreach to the stakeholders, the residents and business owners in South Willington Village, and got their input, and I think made for a better proposed regulation. And I'm happy to answer questions that the commission may have.
Any questions from the commission?
Probably, but I know I'm getting into this game pretty late, so I'm going to shut up. But I got a few. I guess one of the functions of the Planning and Zoning Commission is to sort of be the bulwark between a business that wants to lease their space, rent their space. You know, I mean, they're for profit. So, and again, that character. So you mentioned the mills being sort of unfettered, unchained about who they want to put in there. I'm okay with that, but we do run the risk of, you know, having a business in there that we don't really want. So that's all.
If I may respond, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So it's, you know, I think that's an important consideration, and I think we do delineate the list of potential uses that could go inside an existing building. So it would be limited to these things, and actually we'll have to change this. I'm noticing both medical and professional office and art galleries are listed as one. So I'll have to renumber that. No, apologies for that. You know, it is limited. It is not any potential use. You know, medical, professional office, art galleries, personal service, retail, restaurants, adult and child care.
So personal service, that's something like a place that would do pedicures or a massage parlor, something like that.
Sure, that would be included.
Probably 20 different things I could think of.
Right.
Right. I mean, and that's, I mean, one of the things about the special permit is my understanding of, you know, days gone by, the reason that was put in there is so somebody's kind of looking at it, because I can interpret this list very differently than Walter might, or than Ralph Toulis might. So if I don't have to speak to anyone, and I have multiple, you know, square foot places that I am actively trying to rent, I can put in a whole lot of stuff in there that may not have been the intent. And what I heard was that the mill owners wouldn't have to go through the special permit process. And again, I'm not really against that. I think I trust I mean, I do. You know, the Bacinos and whoever own those mills, I think are probably in concert with what the town wants, but they are for profit, and they may not always be. So
And just to respond to that, I mean, it's that whereas they would not go through a special permit process for a tenant inside an existing building, they would still go through the zoning permit. And so your zoning officer would have to thoroughly review and make sure that the proposed use met the intent of the regulation.
And I would just add right now, this is an R80. So these guys are going to the ZBA in theory every time they need it, because they're a residential zone in the middle.
Sorry, ZBA, sure.
So that's a whole nother regulatory process that they're in theory supposed to demonstrate. So
there's
there's
mills is ZBA. I mean,
because the property's still zoned R80.
I didn't
And
know.
so what it's complicated, because what happens is he'll get
There
a
it is.
tenant, they'll call me and I'll say, okay, well, yeah, to get that use in that building, like for example, in any appropriate use, an artist, I'll say, you'll need to go to the ZBA, and they're thinking that's a $400 application fee in 60 days.
Yeah,
And they just keep on looking somewhere else, and we've lost people.
I'll bet.
So
That's clumsy.
let me just ask a question out loud. Why wouldn't they try to get it rezoned so it's not R80?
Right.
That's
Why
what
is
we're
that?
doing. That's what this is.
That's
Let's
what
design
this is.
commercial.
I see. So this is.
Well, this is Bob Shabbat. I would just like to address this, is that since 2014, when the study was or 2015, when the study was done in South
Right.
Willington, you know, we looked at village zone, village district, and the state has some very restrictive items in there. And not only are they restrictive, it puts the burden on the town to have a number of professionals on staff in order to review what would be able to happen in the village district. I think this is a step in the right direction.
Oh, me too.
Insofar as
Here.
eliminating so many hoops that need to be addressed, and being able to move in a straightforward path so that somebody can open a small business.
I agree.
So, thank you for working it out to this point now. We saw what the state had to offer, and that was not good for the residents or for the town. And I think this is the other alternative that we need to be looking at.
I completely agree, Mom.
I noticed one of the uses on there, there's a manufacturing assembly. Where would what would that be for, like the mill?
Yes, and here, let me bring it back up again.
I think it's great that we're trying to do this. I think it's hard to picture a scenario that might create a problem, but I think it's the right direction, certainly.
So this would light manufacturing, which is minor processing or assembly.
That's considered design commercial?
10,000 square foot or less, would be allowed even only by special permit, even in existing buildings. So any proposal would require a public hearing and coming before planning and zoning.
Okay.
And that wouldn't be much different than what, like the old Jerry's Tavern, the old cow barns that were rebuilt. That was being utilized as a sub-assembly manufacturing for woodworking the last time somebody was in there. So, it just makes it easier for someone to get up and going without so many hoops. And the hoops are basically means time, months of time. And that's always been a problem. I think the regulations can be edited or whatever is necessary to facilitate yet protect what Andy's fears may be insofar as, or other people in town insofar as, oh my God, how did that happen? How did that type of a business get in down there? So I think this has to be gone over, and I don't know if it needs to be any more specific to rule certain businesses out. I'm not sure. I'd ask the economic development folks to jump in on that, and their consultant.
Yeah, so I mean, again, this is a proposal that's come from economic development that we've gone through a few times, and has also been, the folks in South Willington Village were given an opportunity to discuss this, and actually they did add and modify some of the proposed uses, and actually a lot of the distinction between use or expansion of existing buildings and creation of new buildings. They added a lot of nuance to that. So I think, well, I helped write this, so I think a lot of thought has gone into it, but I think that's also the truth.
John, how much participation did you get from the residents?
Mike, you can correct me. I think we had between 30 and 40 participants.
That's decent.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
We had a number of things on the agenda that night, because we were also talking about the South Willington sidewalk stuff, and because it's the same group of people, we did it at the same time. But a few people came by the office to pick up copies, and we probably got 6 or 7 calls to the office of people in the area that were encouraged by the fact that we were trying to provide another viable use for these buildings. But at the end of the day, the goal is that when you drive down the street 10 years from now, nothing will look different, because the structures are going to still be there, but you may have a coffee shop. And so there was pretty much positive feedback. There was 1 or 2 folks that had some questions about certain language and how you'd interpret it, and consistency, which we've adjusted accordingly. But we didn't have anyone that felt like this was going to create any type of concern related to development, or something would get by us as far as what this list shows.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of the concerns were actually relative to the sidewalk and direct abutters wondering what was going to happen to their front yards and stuff like that. But in terms of the regulatory uses, that portion of the meeting, it was fairly supportive, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's never, you can't do anything better than reach out to the people that live in an area and get their feedback, because they're the ones that are going to have to live with this.
Right.
I,
It's
All
planning
right.
and zoning though that gets the phone calls.
All right, let's, any more questions from the commission? Going to open it up to the public next. Any questions from the public? Any comments from the public?
Of course there are.
Okay. Is that you,
Uh,
Ralph?
That is me, Ralph Toulis, 47
All right.
Village Hill Road. One of my concerns about the whole South Willington Village is that, particularly when it comes to residential, if some of these accessory apartments are allowed, we have an issue here with two things: wastewater and potable water. How does this new section encourage the establishment of a small, perhaps packaged wastewater treatment system to serve the village, so that that does not become a limiting factor to any future uses in the zone? I didn't see anything in my review of this. And the other thing is, in the map, the east side of Village Street, well, it looks like it was excluded. And I don't understand that, because that is also an essential part of the South Willington Village.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can respond to
Go ahead,
the
John.
first part of it. I would ask maybe Mike, who knows the area a little bit better than I do, to answer the second part. To the first part, Ralph, about encouragement or anticipation for community water, wastewater. This doesn't explicitly encourage it, nor discourage. I think the intensity of development is going to be, in an area where you have certainly no wastewater and limited public water. Your intensity of development is going to be necessarily limited. But I think that the broad creativity of uses and the increased potential for commercial or revenue generating uses, could create the financial incentive for developers to come up with more creative solutions for water and wastewater. Certainly beyond something that a one family or a two family would be able to anticipate. But again, this is a use regulation, not really an infrastructure plan. As far as the location on Village Street, I don't know, Mike, what do you think?
yeah, I'm trying to compare to the aerials to see, just to make sure that the parcel lines match. So it looks like the Mill Village on the left side is included in that. And then it picks up the piece that goes to the pond. So there's basically two parcels. It would be 25 Village Street, and then 9, which is the right side of the street for those mill houses. So
Right side if you're heading north.
right. So we could certainly pull that boundary to include those on that side of the street. I mean, for all intents and purposes, those mill buildings are not going to probably be anything but what they are. I mean, they're not going to have an apartment get swapped out with a hairdresser. So it would just be if the tenant or the owner wanted to do something with them all together. I don't know what the commission's thoughts are on if they'd like to expand that or not.
Well, never say never.
That's true.
Well, I think if we have a proposed linear plan here, it should include everything that was included in the historic district. I think it'd be a disservice if it wasn't.
I agree.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. And so the only other thing that I wanted to mention was related to the accessory apartments, to add to what John mentioned. One of the things we have to do now is allow accessory apartments because of the changes from the last legislative session. And there are some specific language in there which talks about adding a single apartment and what that does related to septic. And in certain circumstances, there is no additional design requirements for having to show septic capacities, et cetera. So in those circumstances, someone could add an accessory apartment and they wouldn't need to get an engineer to design or look at the capacity of the septic, because under the new legislation, they're adding a 1-bedroom accessory apartment, they're going to be allowed to do that. So this falls in line with that to some extent, as far as the mandate that commissions now allow accessory dwelling units.
I understand that, but won't Eastern Highlands get involved regardless?
Yeah.
They will, but as of 6 months ago, they could say, oh, you're adding a bedroom. We want to go through the process of evaluating your septic, seeing how big it is, seeing what the capacity is. We'll do some test holes maybe to look for reserve area. Under the new legislation, if they're adding a single bedroom accessory dwelling unit, they can skip that process.
So even though the existing system may be undersized for the current
No,
use as residential.
you still need to meet public health code.
Yes, that's my issue. That's my concern here. And the ideal situation for the entire South Wellington village is a wastewater treatment system that encompasses all of the uses that currently exist and room for expansion, as well as the school and what may happen with that, which is another story that I won't get into tonight.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fine goal and something that economic development, if I could speak on their behalf, would certainly welcome. But it's, that sort of capital investment is sort of outside the scope of what planning and zoning has to look at in this case.
But if this regulation takes off, it certainly would help. If we have some uses start populating in this area, it'll certainly, I think, make that an easier sell, because we're going to start to see some of that growth and some of that demand. But that, yeah, probably a bit more of a long-term, though I would love to have that, because it would facilitate a ton of uses that people have asked about, but you've got to deal with septic and all these other things, and they either don't have the geographic area or it's too expensive.
That's correct. And everybody would be gung ho for a municipal wastewater treatment system in this area until the zone got a supplemental tax bill to pay for it. And then they would go through the ceiling. Okay. Moving on to something else. Page 3. This is just wordsmithing. Page 3, item 2B. Last sentence. Shared parking may be allowed provided both users can demonstrate that peak demand hours do not coincide, I think would be a better way to say that. I know what you're trying to do there.
Okay.
Item E. You're using the word screens, and I think screened might better suit that.
So it would be loading docks and or areas shall be located or screened. I see. Yeah,
Correct.
that's probably a typo. I think that's the correct word.
Under 3C, I have a question about the front and rear yard. Just curious, you're allowing 1/6 of the lot's road frontage, which can be awfully close if you've got a long skinny lot. And I'm curious if anyone actually went through every lot in the zone and did the math.
I'll acknowledge that I did not. We modeled these on some other sort of village regulations that were developed and placed in sort of historic mill villages, very similar to South Willington. And you know, sort of encourages the placement of appropriately scaled buildings relatively close to the road to encourage pedestrian travel.
And I
Understand-
think
I
the other
understand.
thing,
But
Understand.
yeah, go ahead. I'll leave it to Mike, but I did not physically do the
Okay.
measurements.
I think the only other thing that's worth mentioning is because it's a state road for most of it, you have a larger right of way. And so, you know, you don't, even with a reduced setback of something less than 1/6, because the property line is farther back from the road in most cases than you might expect, you're still going to have a fair distance between that. And with the sidewalk project that we have, you know, we really want to foster those connections right to the road through that infrastructure.
Well, I'm looking at one lot in particular. It's across from 124 River on the west side. It's a long skinny lot. That one could be problematic. It's under independent ownership. I just think the exercise of checking that, because as anyone who's ever sat on a planning and zoning commission knows, regulations look all fine and dandy until you have an application in front of you. And that's when you find out where all the gotchas are. You cannot foresee them all.
That piece there, yeah, John, if you go to layers and flip on the dimension, that parcel is, I think, only 36 feet wide, if I looked at it right, 35. So I don't know what they would be able to build there anyways. Even if we gave them a setback of 1/6, the property is not wide enough to do very much with.
Well, I could do a skinny building like in Boston. It just sold for 1.2 million.
I saw that.
Well, I won't be signing up to buy it, but maybe someone else will.
I'm sure the assessor and tax collector would be happy to collect the taxes on that.
Mike, what's on that property now? Anything?
Nothing.
It's, no, if you, yeah, there you go. So like, it would be a great kayak launch. That's probably it.
Yeah.
So that one, you know, doesn't give me too much stress because I don't know that you could really do anything with it.
I understand. I was just nitpicking at some of the particulars that wind up in regulations that no one bothers to actually try to apply to a particular site or parcel or use. Been there, done that. I think at this point, that's the extent of my comments.
All right, was there any more comments or from the public or questions?
I would just, for the record, Mr. Chairman, in terms of Mr. Toulis's editorial comments in sections 2 and 3, be happy to make those minor word changes.
Yeah, thank you. They seemed reasonable. You know, they read better. So Mike, we're gonna talk about you also sent a sheet out for the design commercial regulations,
Yeah,
some of the
so,
changes.
yeah, so, and I will say both of these have been referred to CROG. And so we have no actionable comments or any concerns or issues that they have with that. So I can go through the changes for the design commercial zone.
Well, I noticed you did quite a bit of carving out of things like logging and all that.
Yep.
So where does logging fit in now that it's carved out of there?
Yeah, so, well, I don't know, John, do you want to hang or do you want me to
Yeah,
ask the
no,
commission
I'm
to?
happy to, because I collaborated on these a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let me go through them and yeah, John and I talked about this, and I've spoken to the commission. Basically, I think what we need to do, and we talked about this the last meeting, is we need to be in a position where we can respond when we get these inquiries, because I get calls all the time for some of the buildings that are in town. People are interested, but our regs are so tight that we can't make the uses that we see today work. And so a lot of these changes are in response to wanting to make that so that we can be a little bit more proactive. So basically, let me start with the beginning here. You want me to share my screen or no?
Would be a good idea.
Okay, I can. I'll share a red line. We can go that way. Okay. You see, it's too small.
It hasn't come up yet.
How about now?
It's working. Here we
There it
go.
is.
Can you see it or is it too small?
I can see it.
I can
It's
see
all
it.
right.
So we eliminated, just kind of starting with what we from the beginning, and I'll go through it. We eliminated the forestry activities because that all, and you'll see as we move forward, that all has come out of the zoning regulations, because in the Inland Wetlands Commission, after a very long and arduous process, has adopted regulations for that. Willington is one of 11 towns in the state that can regulate timber harvest activities beyond what all the other towns do, because we had the requirements on the books before the state said it's a permitted use as of right. So we have those regulations, which we wrote. They were signed by the commissioner, approved, they're in place. So we don't need any references to logging or forestry now, because it all comes out of those regulations. So any reference to that has been removed. So the other thing that you're seeing now is under the DC zone, for C and D, business services, banking, real estate, general offices, cafes, coffee shops, bistros, or similar food service establishments for which alcohol is not served up to 5,000 square feet is allowed via an administrative zoning permit, which means if you want to put a coffee shop in Phelps Plaza, you come in and get an administrative zoning permit from staff. You don't need to do a public hearing, notices to abutters for something that's small. If you're doing something that's beyond the 5,000 square feet in either new or an existing space, then it would go through the traditional special permit process. And so I guess maybe I run through it, and if you have questions, we'll go back in case they get answered. Like permitted accessory uses, outdoor dining in association with an approved eating establishment that is required per the recent legislation. We have to allow outdoor dining as of right. So I'm adding it here to make it clear it has to be associated with something that's lawfully existing as a food service establishment. I'm also adding apartments above the main floor. So again, if you have a building that has some type of a commercial use and you want to have an apartment upstairs, we had someone come in, I think it was 8 Tolland Turnpike. He had that Victorian and he was having trouble getting it occupied because of the way the regs were written. So in this case, you could have an office downstairs, real estate, coffee shop, and you could have an apartment. Still have to meet requirement. It's not as if we don't know. it would need to go through and get still permitting from our office, but it wouldn't need a special permit. The other thing that I added, moving on to special permit section, you'll see these 3 lines at the bottom. For any use or use type which is not defined within section 4.3 as being allowable or prohibited, the commission may issue a special permit in accordance with this section. So essentially what that means is, to use an example that's not on the books yet, a tavern or a brewery or something along those lines. I had someone call me 3 weeks ago, wanted to put a brewery in the building next to Dunkin' Donuts. And they had one other building they were looking at, the Bruce's Kitchen building. So in one of those cases, it required a zone change, then it would have required a text change, then it would have required a special permit. And so if each of those takes 60 days, we're 6 months out before they even know if they can have the thing. And so this line will allow the commission to consider uses which we don't have a line for under the special permit category, which gives you the flexibility to say yes or no without having to force someone to go through a text change because we don't have a specific category listed, provided it's still in keeping with the intent of the DC zone. So we wouldn't have something that was completely outside the realm of what that intent was come in, but we want to provide that flexibility so that if someone comes in with something we haven't thought of, because the regulations don't change all the time, we can bring them in for a special permit and not go through all these other changes. I beefed up the club definition to just make it a little bit clearer, and reworked some of these things. I added the word inn and bed and breakfast establishments to go along with motels, but that language was there. I think we would probably want to encourage a bed and breakfast before we would encourage a motel. I added, again, the language for general or professional offices in excess of 5,000 square feet. So again, if it's bigger than that, it's a special permit. And again, personal services or any of those things which are in excess of 5,000 square feet comes before the commission. I added the language because I think it's more broad, but still encompasses the intent, recreational activities, rather than historic and monument sites, because there's not really reference to that anywhere else in the regs. I took out mortuary and photographic studios because photographic studios are captured further above in the business or professional offices. Again, retail trade, if it's included, it's got that 5,000 square foot threshold. Restaurants, taverns, distilleries, and or brew pubs are allowable whether or not they serve alcohol by special permit. Indoor entertainment, I added that to go in line with some of the other stuff that we have in other sections, but theater was already in existence. I took out this legitimate and or motion picture, and added the indoor entertainment as an accessory use, which is consistent with some of the other entertainment language that we have. Moving on, most of this stuff, I took out tourist homes. We don't have that listed anywhere, and we don't have any commercial greenhouses. We don't have any of that, and I think I don't know that it necessarily is appropriate for what we're trying to do for those areas. Recreational
Mike, would
activity.
commercial greenhouses come up against the marijuana laws?
They don't get to qualify themselves as ag, so they wouldn't be able to come in and say, hey, we're farming.
Okay.
So we'll have to work that in when we write that section. Veterinary outpatient clinics, again, I think that's covered. We don't define that specifically. And I don't like having uses that we don't define listed as a specific category. The rec stuff, like I said, I included further up. And I took out some language in there, special permit required for principal use on a lot, accessory to for school bus parking. And I think that a lot of this is just noise. It doesn't necessarily add anything to the regulatory framework. And they have this other language which was listed there, which again I added further up for the entertainment, particularly because with restaurants and breweries, wineries, vineyards, all things that I get calls on in Willington, people that are interested in these things, they want to be able to have an acoustic band come in and play music for a Saturday night when people are coming by. They want to have that flexibility. So again, all these are special permit. They're not allowed as of right. They still have to come before you, public hearing, blah, blah, blah. But I'm trying to put in what we have received calls on so that the next time I can say, yeah, that's allowed. I'm removing the section under 612 for restaurants, which requires that they have no fewer than, or basically, let me pull it up, make it bigger. So there's a section that's currently on the books for no restaurant located as the principal use of a building on a separate lot shall have fewer than 30 seats for a service to patrons, excluding counter seats, table seats, and get into this calculation. Again, we're not seeing restaurants, particularly in Willington, with the not having sewer. 30 seats is a lot from a septic perspective, also from a size perspective. If somebody wanted to have a small cafe, I don't think we need to create these additional qualifiers. I think all of the intent that comes out of these sections falls within your purview under the special permit requirements. So I don't think we need to say you cannot have less than this across the board. You must have more than that. We will not include counter seats. I think we want to have that flexibility because a lot has changed since when these things were written. And so these two sections here, you'll see I am proposing that we delete section 6.20, which is high intensity uses, which is an additional subsection which lists certain uses in town which they consider to be high intensity uses due to their potential negative impact on the environment. And then it gets into effluent and soils and septic system design and some of these additional design criteria which apply in very specific and limited cases. I think that a lot of it is not tied to the current health code. A lot of it is required by the health code. And so I don't really think we need to get into any of those things because at the end of the day, they're going to have to show that they have a septic system that meets code, water setup that meets code. If there's wetlands, they're going to have to go through those. So I don't think we need to have additional layers of restrictions for something like a restaurant because it's a high intensity use. I think all that comes out of the health code. And we don't have a lot of development within special flood hazard areas. So again, a lot of this with perk testing and permeability and test holes, it's all covered under the health code. Commercial logging, as I said, we now have a set of regulations for that. So this section I am proposing to be removed because it is no longer part of the Planning and Zoning Commission realm. The next thing I'm proposing to remove, because if you'll notice at the top in the DC zone, I've included it as part of the special permit category, is our existing alcohol section. We have a whole bunch of permit classes and certain requirements that come under liquor control, which are not up to date. They don't meet the current types of liquor permits issued by liquor control. And liquor control issues permits in a totally different way than we do. So someone could have a cafe permit, but be a restaurant. They could have a club permit, but be a restaurant. So saying where you can have certain classes of permits and that certain classes of permits are only allowed in certain areas, and then tying back to a liquor control statute, which has been overhauled many times and that we have no control over, in my mind, again, does not make sense and just creates an additional level of restriction, which doesn't get us anything. At the end of the day, if someone's proposing to serve alcohol, they'll come before you for a special permit and you will review all of the requirements under the special permit section for appropriateness. So I'm proposing we remove that and just add alcohol service to the special permit section. So this whole section basically says you can only have these types of permits or these classes of permits in these zones. But again, they tie back to liquor control, which has changed. So that's the majority of why all of this has been removed, because it all just comes under the special permit requirements. And with that, I will promise to stop talking and take any questions.
Makes sense.
It
Yeah.
seems to simplify everything, you know, we don't have to double dip on something that's already regulated by another agency.
We currently have 320 pages of zoning regulations, and not a lot of towns have that many. So I'm trying to keep the intent the same, but simplify it so that people can actually read the regulations and understand what they say. But again, I'm trying, John and I have had a lot of discussions with people that are interested in, I work in Ashford, and I also do work in Tolland. And I can tell you that in the last 6 to 9 months, the amount of people that are calling me in Willington that have interest in parcels or existing buildings has tripled since when I started in 2018. And John can attest to the fact that the whole vision of the Economic Development Commission is, we want you to get off the highway and go right and come to Willington, because we're happy to have you, and we're much cheaper and easier to do development in than Tolland and some of our other neighbors. So I think that we're at this point where we need to get ready for that, because I'm really getting a lot of calls, and I promise I'm not exaggerating.
All right, any further questions from the commission on these changes?
No.
How about we'll go to the public now. Any questions or comments from the public on the changes of the design commercial regulations?
Believe it or not, I don't have anything to say.
That's hard to believe, Ralph.
Probably because I haven't read it thoroughly, so.
Well, quick, let's get it adopted before he has the chance.
Thanks, Mike.
Oh, wait, sorry, am I muted? Oh, my bad. I'm kidding.
All right, so I guess we have no further questions.
My recommendation would be that we leave the hearing open on these, just so that we can have some time in case somebody thinks of something or has an aha moment that they want to run through the regs to see how it would be treated. So we'll just kick it out 2 more weeks just to give everybody a chance.
That's
You're
a good idea.
You're gonna give me some time then, huh?
Yeah, that's fair, Ralph. Give you a chance to go through it. All right, I'm going to make a motion that we leave the public hearing open.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so the public hearing remains open. All right, nothing under new business tonight. Item F, unfinished business, PZ-21-15, 1 lot re-subdivision, 32 Hancock Road, applicant Russ Heinz.
We left that on there in case he was able to get the revisions and the appraisal done in time, but I don't have anything. So just someone can make a motion to continue that to the next meeting. Hopefully he'll have that done by then.
So
So
moved,
moved.
seconded, whatever.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so that one will be on the next agenda. Item G, approval of minutes of September 7th, 2021.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right,
Aye.
Abstain.
okay. Correspondence? Don't think we have any.
Walter, can I just make a
Yes,
quick
go
comment?
ahead. Go ahead,
Um,
Lori.
Our next meeting is October 5th, and there's a town meeting that night. And so I will probably be late.
Okay,
Just because I feel like I need to go to the town meeting.
Okay,
Same here.
okay, hopefully we have enough show up here. We have quite a few commissioners now. We should be okay, I would think.
I mean, sometimes those meetings are 7 minutes and sometimes they're an hour and a half, so.
Okay,
No.
just whenever you're done.
Okay.
Same with you, John.
Thanks.
All right. Let's see, public comment. Public comment. The commission will hear brief comments at this time from anyone wishing to speak. No business can be conducted here, nor can any comments be made about any items on the agenda. Anyone from the public? Guess not. Item J, staff report and discussion. Review of proposed temporary cannabis moratorium language.
So,
I
At the
see it's
last
6
meeting-
months. I see it says 6 months.
yeah, and so we can tweak that language based on what you're most comfortable with. That would be the max. So that would mean
Right.
we just need to get regulations written as the commission within those 6 months. If we get it in 2 months, we adopt the regs and we remove the moratorium. But this is basically just the proposed language. So this would go to public hearing. It would go to CROG just like a text amendment, and it would actually be inserted into the regs. And then we'll write regulations and swap them out. So this is essentially saying that we're going to undertake a planning process, and in the interim, we're going to have a moratorium. I think we probably, and I'd be happy to do it on behalf of the commission, should let the Board of Selectmen know that this is what we're doing, because the law says that they can take certain actions related to prohibiting smoking on town property, for example, or parks. And so we might want to know what stance, if any, they're going to take on some of this. If the Board of Selectmen decides to adopt an all-out prohibition on cannabis, period, even if we adopt regs which allow it, that would supersede anything that we do. So I think we should send a shot across the bow to them to make sure that they're not going to do something to just undo whatever work we might start.
Yeah, it might
First
save
of-
us quite a bit of time.
I agree, but I think the 6 months is good to have in there initially. That way, if we need it, it's there.
I agree with that.
And if we don't need it, that's fine, but it's going to give us plenty of time to work on these.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, are you expecting some kind of direction from the state within the next number of months insofar as what their thoughts are, or what types of regulations they're hoping to put in place?
Expecting wouldn't be the right word, because that would imply that I think we might get something. But they basically pushed this onto the towns and said, as of July 1, this is all allowed. They haven't created a licensing process on their end yet. They have no idea what they're going to do. But one of the things that we do know is that they'll have to demonstrate local compliance as part of their application to the state. So there's a little bit of a catch there where we have that control. And our legislation is set up differently than Mass, so we can't necessarily use all of what they've got there. I don't know, and I don't know if John is still here and listening, because he's plugged in legislatively a bit more than I am. I don't think we have any understanding that the state has even mentioned drafting regulations or model templates. Do you know of anything?
For cannabis specifically?
Right.
No.
No guidance, no line on any of that.
No. They're working on their own process through like consumer protection and the special social justice panel for sort of vetting and granting licenses. They're pretty much letting municipalities kind of go their own way, because there's multiple ways that municipalities can control this, zoning being one and ordinances being another. I think they're letting towns be the laboratories of democracy, as they say.
The meth labs of democracy. Yeah.
And also doing it this way, though, is going to make it very convoluted, town to town to town.
Yeah, there was one town, southern part of the state, which adopted a resolution through their Board of Selectmen or Town Council, which basically said federally, it's not allowed. Marijuana is not legal federally, so we're taking the position that we don't have to do anything and it's not allowed, and we're just gonna basically put our heads in the sand. Some towns have all out prohibited it. Enfield, for example, most recently, I think, all out prohibited it. I think of the 30 towns in the CROG region, which is what we're a part of, about 18 of them are considering temporary moratoriums while they develop the regulations. So, I think this gives us the opportunity to write the regs without having the concern of someone showing up and saying, I want to do this in, XYZ building. And right now, under retail, if they wanted to sell cannabis, we would have to treat it, if it came in tomorrow, as a retail operation. So someone could buy Dollar General and say, I'm going to turn it into 7,000 square feet of cannabis retail. And it would be an existing use. And that's the main concern. The only other thing I'll say is that Howler and Sage is pushing all of their towns to adopt a moratorium temporarily so that we can write regs.
Okay.
When would this go to public hearing?
So if you guys like the language, I'd submit it to CROG and it would go to public hearing at the end of October.
It'll be interesting to see what the townspeople think. That'll be a good guide as to, what kind of take the temperature on this.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that the commission is interested in doing any type of survey, we could probably put out some type of a simple 1 or 2 question, email blast on the town's website to see what you think. I mean, if you want to know what people think, double-edged sword, but I'm happy to work something up and get it sent out. If you want.
How accurate would something like that be?
Sorry, what was that?
How accurate would something like that be? I mean, could I go out there and vote 17 times?
Well, I mean, we have an email blast. So it would just be to that email address, whether or not, well, depending on how we set up the survey, I can set it up in a like a Google Forms so that it will only accept 1 submission per email address.
Okay.
I know that sometimes, go ahead.
It might be interesting, to just get a gauge with that, but a public hearing is obviously where you get I put more stock in that.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So how about we advertise the public hearing through that blast?
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
End of October is only 6 weeks away. We're going to have something ready by then.
Well, the only thing that you're going to adopt,
Moratorium.
right?
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to insert myself too deeply into this issue. I would note moratoria hearings, I think, are not going to get the same sort of crowd because it's, all you're saying, hey, who wants to hit the pause button for a while? And that's not something that gets people real incensed one way or the other. I'll note that in one of my towns that I work with, Clinton on the shoreline, we actually went the other way and proposed to regulate cannabis retailers as if they were package stores, essentially, which is to say by special permit and with separation distances from, from schools and churches and things like that. And the public turned out in dramatic numbers to oppose it, to oppose the concept. So when there's an actual proposal for let's either permit this or prohibit this, I think you'll tend to get more public input. Not to rain on the parade of a moratorium, because I think it's a valuable time for the town to get their act together. I wouldn't necessarily anticipate a huge crowd for that.
We can we can use that e-blast act once we want to schedule the hearing for the actual regulations. We can do that like we did with the poultry regs, where we sent everything out. We put the information on the website and we allowed people to submit comments ahead of time, so that we can kind of gauge where people will be and give them a chance to respond.
This has to get more interest than chickens, I would hope.
I don't know. People are fiercely protective of their rights to have some hens.
Roosters for all, Mike.
If I remember from my youth, growing pot and chicken shit works well too, so.
So I just need you guys to decide if you're comfortable with the regulation, then make a motion that we basically schedule the public hearing and refer the moratorium language to CROG, and I'll get it set up.
So
and if-
moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, got it moving, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you for your work.
Yep, no, that was good.
Nope, that's happy to do it and keep things moving along. So we'll start that and jump right in on looking at regs.
All right, that pretty much wraps up everything. Did you have anything else to discuss, or that was it?
The only other thing that I'll say is that we held interviews for the assistant land use agent position. I had, I'm sure you all remember Emily Perko, who worked with us. So
Yes.
she sat in with me to do the interviews because she's still in the field, but has done the job. So I thought she had a really good perspective. We interviewed a short list of 3 candidates, and one that I think is very strong and would be a really good fit, both in terms of the job, in terms of dealing with people, and fit in the building, because all 3 of those are equally important when I'm looking for someone. So we're going to kind of work through the rest of the process. I'm really hopeful that we'll have someone. They fell into the municipal side of things. It wasn't something that they set out to do, but it's something that they found an interest in after being exposed to it. So I'm hopeful that this will be a good fit.
Good.
Good.
All right, it is 8:37 p.m. Meeting adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.